going on, guys? You're listening to the Shepherds and Kings podcast. My name is Jacob Trelaw, and I'm the founder and the host of this podcast. I'd like to introduce this episode briefly. We have our very first guest here today, and I've chosen this guest specifically to be first. One, because of what he's going to talk about. We're talking a little bit about addiction, specifically alcohol, but we know there are things in all of our lives that we struggle with and things that we can all get help with, whether it's pornography or food, whether it's depression or anger or a drug. There are plenty of things that we need to overcome, and so hopefully his story inspires you a little bit. But in addition to that, I really want you to see it and really want the focus to be on honesty and being able to look yourself in the face and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. And being able to hear someone else do that hopefully will give you some inspiration as to maybe what changes you might need to make in your life. So without further ado, let's get to it. Our guest today is a unique guest. It's my brother-in-law, Brock Rose, and he's agreed to come on and talk a little bit about a very personal story, his story, and how God brought him through addiction. And again, it's very personal, but he agreed to share it because we thought it might be helpful to anyone who hears that story, anyone with that kind of background. And it's a real pleasure to be able to talk to him and for him to be able to share his testimony with you. Brock?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. First, I just want to thank you for this opportunity just to be able to share my story and really share the just the redemptiveness that God has for every single one of us in our lives, whether it be for me personally coming out of addiction or no matter where you're at in life, just having this opportunity to just share the gospel and share, how God
absolutely
reaches down and picks you up. So yeah, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor. You hear in the past a lot of people that have struggled with addiction grew up in broken homes and things like that,
sure,
per se. But for me, it was, I wasn't my stereotypical route. Like my parents were awesome. Both parents loved me. And so I grew up with that. But with that, I grew up hearing the word, preaching the word every single day. And every single week. It was basically every day. But it was just forced on me. So it wasn't really a choice that I had. So I say that to kind of give you a background to kind of why I chose the path that I did per se.
Okay, right.
So all that to say, grew up in
Christian school, right?
Yeah, Christian school. I got saved when I was 12 years old. I say I got saved. I said a prayer and
right.
There wasn't really any change though. It was more I was afraid to go to hell and
right.
Didn't really understand what all that meant, but I was like, man, I don't really like the way hell sounds, so I'm gonna I'm gonna say the prayer. But but growing up, athletics was a big part of my life, and I would say for me, that was a great blessing, but at the same point, it was a detriment and a turning point.
Sure. Was there anything about athletics in particular that kind of started you down this road, or was that just?
Well, so it all kind of went hand in hand. So, junior high school, I started having more and more success. Started seeing basketball was what was my main sport, but. Junior high, I had all the bigger high schools. I even had some colleges looking at me when I was in junior high. Unfortunately, I just never grew from that point. So.
That can be a detriment, for sure.
But with that came this mentality of like, I've always been the best player on any one of my teams. So with that comes popularity,
sure,
which is what I sought after, which naturally just came with that. So, and that feels good, right? Like it's just
absolutely.
So with that popularity came girls, came just that whole lifestyle.
Right.
So I say it was a detriment too, because with that brought that with. And for me, I wasn't pursuing the Lord at that time. So it was, that turned into my main pursuit, especially in high school. So that's where, when I look back, that's kind of where it all started, and kind of where that shift of identity changed. The shift of identity of like, all right, my identity is in Christ when I got saved. And then that shift changed when all of that started happening. It shifted toward, all right, girls, sports, being popular, being all those type of things. And that's what I was chasing after, which kind of leads into where drinking started out for me. The first time I drank was in high school. It wasn't actually until my senior year. So I was 18 at the time. And it wasn't, at that time too, I was still very focused on my athletic career. So it was like, man, like, I know alcohol is not the best thing to stay in shape and things like that. So it really wasn't.
It wasn't a pursuit per se.
But just naturally, you find yourself in those situations if you're going to parties and things like that. And I remember the first time I drank was 18 years old in my good friend's basement. His older brother bought us a 12-pack of beer, and we drank it. And my wife and I talk about it now. If only I knew what I know now, then, like, a lot of times people have that first experience with alcohol, and it's like a horrible experience. They're like, I felt so sick afterwards, or like, I didn't like the way it tasted. Like, it's their first time.
Yeah.
I was the exact opposite. Like, the first time I drank, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this just gives me a whole nother level of, confidence when, you're tipsy or drunk, just that feeling. I loved it. And regardless of waking, for whatever reason, didn't wake up that next day very sick. So I was just like, man, this is awesome.
Sure, yeah.
So that was kind of my first introduction into alcohol for me. And yeah, from that point on, played 4 years of college basketball. It was even a Christian school that I went to, so it wasn't, I didn't go to the party schools, but it's something I sought out. So in college was really when it turned to, all right, playing college basketball with that lifestyle just comes easy. So it just, and I purposely sought out that lifestyle. So I purposely sought out people that I knew that were going to be doing those same things. So I just started, partying a lot more in college, and it really, I guess you could say, it started spiraling.
Sure.
From there, and I don't know how much detail you want me to get into just about that.
Whatever you feel is necessary.
But yeah, I mean, it started out as, college weekend parties, and
so did it affect your schooling itself? Like, you graduated school or no?
I went to 6 full years of college and still do not have a college education. So yes,
so obviously it affected
it affected my schooling. So halfway through my sophomore year at the first school that I was playing for, I ended up getting kicked out. And that was a result of alcohol, because the school I went to was pretty strict against drinking, and even being on the athletic team, our coaches had higher standards of how we should be conducting ourselves and student athletes and things like that. But ended up, they found out I went to Cancun for spring break, and I don't think I need to say much more on that. But yeah, so I ended up getting kicked out. So I lost the whole semester. And that was literally 2 weeks before finals. So it was the end of the year.
Lost basically.
I went to a whole semester of school and lost it. And that really, and it stunk, but to me, it wasn't a big deal. I was like, all right, well, I didn't like going to the school anyways. And me and the coach,
for basketball.
Me and the coach really didn't get along. Like, I was planning on leaving potentially anyways. But what that did happen is getting kicked out instead of giving me incomplete in my classes, they failed me in all my classes. So at that point, my GPA dropped below being eligible to even play that next year if I went to another school. So I ended up having to go to community college for a year in Chicago, not play on the team, but just to get my GPA back up. Yeah, I'd say that year my drinking probably picked up a little bit more. I started
community college year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, the year I was in community college, just because, I was just going to school. Like, it wasn't, I didn't, basketball's a long season. You start in October and you end in March. So it's almost that whole school year. Right. You're practices 5 nights a week and games and things like that. So, but this I didn't. So it turned into going out on weekends. So now I'm going out on Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Thursday, so it's just, it turned into, instead of going out and doing things 1 or 2 nights a week, it was 3 or 4 nights a week. And the fact that I was living in my hometown and the guys I used to party with, I knew everybody and knew all the, so yeah, I mean, just.
Okay. So a slow escalation through high school, still slowly escalating through college. Was there a point where you thought, man, I'm over the top yet, or not yet?
There was certain points. There was things that would happen to me. Like, I would be, just one instance. I was out at a club on a weekend, ended up getting jumped and put in the hospital for 3 or 4 days. Like, I was unrecognizable. And laying in a hospital bed, you start thinking, I'm like, man, maybe I'm going a little bit too hard, or I need to start making some life decisions. And all that's great, but I wasn't seeking the Lord in that. So it was just all, and you easily forget, how bad it was. And a week
more
later,
of a self-preservation motive than anything else.
And a week later, I was back doing the same things I was doing before. And no, I never really saw it as a problem because no one around me saw it as a problem. Everyone else was doing it, and I was in school. I was still working. Like, I was still pursuing something. So I never really saw it. I just was like, man, this is what every 21, 22, 23-year-old kid does. So yeah, after that year at community college, I was actually fortunate enough. A school in Minnesota was recruiting me pretty heavily to come play for my last 2 years of eligibility, which was awesome. So I ended up going out there, and I'd say Minnesota, those 2 years were a point where alcohol really started to take over.
Sure.
Junior year, I was in the starting lineup starting off, and I was, at this point now, this was the first time I ever had my own apartment, living on my own. So I'd go home and drink every night. Yeah. And it's just not sustainable, right? So
right.
Started putting on weight, having health issues. Like, so my role started diminishing, and, by the end of the year, I hardly was playing. And I didn't, at that time, I look back now and be like, yeah, you were dumb. Like, of course you weren't. But then I was like, man, this is ridiculous. And then I ended up hurting my knee really bad. It all connects.
Of course,
my drinking, I'm out of shape trying to do things I was doing when I was in the best shape of my life, and I end up hurting my knee. So that really set me back. I thought, you know what? And I didn't really even play my senior year. I was on the team. I didn't practice just because of my knee. I tore my meniscus pretty bad, and instead of having surgery, I would have to sit out my whole senior year. I would just get injections in my knee. So
you finish on a not so good note.
Not so good note.
And then what's next for you?
So it's just crazy. I still had a really good relationship with that coach. No one knew how much I was drinking or what I was doing, and I ended up having the opportunity to come on staff to coach college basketball after that senior year.